American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
Hold on. The picture took a long time to come up. Good grief. What's going on here then? But anyway, yeah. Yeah, well said, Dwight. Well said indeed. And it is very much relevant today, isn't it?
It really is. And it's very pertinent to the topic of conversation this evening as well, which should be a big and interesting one.
The deep state, yes, indeed. So we'll see how that goes. Well, welcome, Ed, once again. It's good to see you. We've survived another week. How's life?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's good, thank you. Great to be here.
Good.
Nice to see we've got an active chat again. And
yes.
Yeah, I think any week that you survive in Clown World is a good week, and it's nearly Friday, and I've got some time off next week, so I get.
Oh, that's right.
10
You're
days.
Going away next week, aren't you?
And I'm just going up to see my brother.
Yeah.
It's a Thursday night, so I won't be here next week, unfortunately. But we're gonna. Well, no, because we said we'd record something beforehand, so we can do that. We just fix up a date.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Let's get into it, Ed. I think you're going to give us a definition of what.
The
official, semi-official definition of what the deep state is.
This is just the official story, as it were. And going to that bastion of truth and decency, Wikipedia, who actually have a page on the deep state. And the deep state refers to a type of governance characterized by potentially secret and unauthorized networks of power operating independently of a state's political leadership. It is often associated with negative connotations and is believed to exert influence alongside or within elected governments. The term originated from the Turkish phrase derin devlet. I don't know what the direct translation of that is, but I could find out.
Nothing to do with Darren Denslow.
No. But it's come to be used globally to describe entrenched power structures that operate independently of democratic processes. In the United States, the concept gained mainstream recognition during Donald Trump's presidency, with claims of a deep state working against his administration's agenda. The idea of a deep state involves clandestine networks within a government, particularly in agencies like MI6, CIA, MI5, Sûreté. No, not Sûreté. The DSG in France.
Yeah.
And most countries have some sort of intelligence agency. But there's also
Well, they do
high-level
now. They do now. It is quite a relatively recent thing.
I think it came out of the Cold War and
Yeah,
the First and Second World War. I mean,
I could give you a little bit of history about that if you wish.
well, but that's apropos for where we're at in the show.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, during the Second World War, the big major war that America got involved in, the Americans decided that they needed some kind of intelligence service, especially since they were allegedly caught napping with Pearl Harbor, and so the OSS came into fruition, and it ran during the war, and Harry Truman was the president, obviously. And at the end of the war, he dissolved the OSS because there was no need for it. And then we had a couple of glorious years of kind of peace. You know, we were kind of at peace. It was the late 40s, early 50s, and nobody was really worrying about anything. And then, of course, all these political machinations started about the domino theory. I don't know if you ever got taught that in school. You know, if one Far East country fell to communism, the rest would soon topple over. And although that country did ultimately fall to communism, Vietnam, none of the rest ever really toppled over, you know. But
Well, it was a common refrain right the way through the Cold War.
yeah,
And
it was.
it's actually now, with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, it's coming back into vogue because everyone's saying, oh, well, if Russia takes Ukraine, they're not going to stop there and they're going to invade Europe. Even though the whole of the Russian leadership, not just Putin, but Medvedev and Lavrov and Zakharov and all of them are saying, no, we're not.
I know.
And the Europeans are going, yes, you are. And the Russians going, no, we're really not. Why would we? We don't even care about you people. What do we want the Baltics for? We don't need a couple of extra cities, for crying out loud.
Indeed.
I mean, they talk about Russia being a gas station masquerading as a country, but the Baltic states are basically fishing villages masquerading as countries. I mean, it's absurd.
I know. Then as a result of the Cold War, Cuban Missile Crisis, and all, well, even it was before that, they set up the CIA, and Harry Truman really didn't want to set the CIA up. He thought that it was a bad idea to give so much power into the hands of people that were effectively unelected and, as a result of the way they were funded, unaccountable, and deliberately unaccountable to Congress, because Congress would effectively say, what budget do you need? They would give them a figure and say, here you go, there's the money, don't tell us what you're doing. So they were making them, Congress were distancing themselves from the CIA. And
but the CIA is also interesting because there's actually two parts to it. There's the side that most of us think of as the CIA, which is gathering intelligence and making sure that the American government is informed about stuff and things like that. But the other component of the CIA that was set up by Truman and is in the original National Security Act that he signed, which created the CIA and a whole bunch of other things. But there is the secret part, which is effectively they're a secret army, and they have carte blanche to do whatever the hell they like. And it's that side of it that was responsible for so many of America's incursions into other countries.
We could go into that later, but yeah. So Truman actually, a couple of weeks after he'd set up the CIA, he effectively tried to disband it again, and couldn't. He was in so much, he had so much buyer's remorse that he tried to disband it, and eventually he just couldn't do it. And so the CIA is still with us to this day, and I think the CIA's got an awful lot to answer for, and we've touched on some of the things before, like MK Ultra,
Kennedy assassination,
possibly the Kennedy assassination,
allegedly,
Fast and Furious, the Iran-Contra affair, all this stuff. Stuff ties
drug smuggling
back
in the 80s.
Yep. Oh yeah, and I mean it all ties back to the CIA, and I mean that the CIA must. I mean, what was it? Afghanistan had never put out more heroin than after America moved in.
Yeah, within a year of the Americans going in 2003, poppy production had gone up 300% or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And interestingly, I think that it was actually they were trying to use that as a weapon to destabilize Russia, because an awful
Yeah.
lot of that heroin actually ended up on the streets of Moscow.
Well, and luckily, Russia appears to have cleaned itself up quite considerably from those days, because I do believe around about that time, when it first started, the early 2000s and things like that, Moscow was a bit of a shithole.
Mm.
But
Oh
anyway,
yeah, I mean,
so
like most cities, but I think, as you said, just from the stuff that I've seen
mhm.
and interacting with Russians on Twitter and stuff, Moscow actually now seems like a very nice place to live.
It does, and it looks quite safe compared to. I mean, New York used to be a bit of a shithole, and then it really cleaned itself up, and it became quite safe, and you were free to walk about at any time of the night or day, and
Although,
never really
no,
felt threatened,
yeah,
as long as you stayed out of you know certain areas. But we won't go into that in too much depth. But yeah, and then New York now appears to be a bit of a shithole again.
well, I mean, American cities generally. I mean, British cities aren't that much better, but we're not fortunately quite at the level of some of the things that I've seen.
We're getting
Some
there
of the
though.
videos of not just homeless people, but people clearly off their faces on fentanyl or
Oh
something,
yeah, yeah.
kind of doubled over in the middle of the street, swaying around like it's like what?
Yeah,
Who
that
would?
I think that is fentanyl that
I
does
mean,
that.
drugs are bad, kids.
Yeah, don't do
don't
drugs.
don't do drugs. Just say
No drugs.
no.
So tell us what you think about and what the deep state brings to mind for you, Ed.
Oh, lots of things. I think that I think that there are multiple layers of it. I think that there's one sort of deep state which is not quite completely out in the open, but much more in the light than in the shadows, and that's the civil servants and the people who, regardless of what party is in power, or what leader there is, or what the policy is, there's a group of powerful civil servants, whether in every single country, who are the ones that stick around and actually do things, and they're the ones that determine what information the politicians get. They're the ones that are responsible for briefing the politicians. They're the filters. They're kind of the gatekeepers. And then I think that within government there's a much more secret level, which is the kind of intelligence agencies and those much more shadowy sort of figures. But I think that there's the deep state itself actually traverses public and private organizations and institutions. I think that there's it's like the banking networks and people like the Bilderberg Group, and not so much even the members of themselves of the Bilderberg Group, but the steering committee and the people who actually run it. And it's like when we went from Blair and then Brown's Labour government, and we ended up with Cameron and now Sunak. Actual policy nothing changed. The
Yeah,
There was still the privatization, there was still the same foreign policy, there was still the same blind, idiotic support of whatever American wars were happening, and it's so I think that the deep state is much bigger and encompasses bankers and probably military people, and I think once you get to the very top levels, the the divisional lines blur. It's like they say that at the top level, MI6 and the CIA are basically one and the same thing. Um, and I think that's probably true of what we're describing of as the sort of, I don't know, the really secret part of the deep state, the ones that are in the shadows behind the curtain who are really pulling the shots. What's your view on it?
yeah. I don't understand why this is behaving like a dog. Taking ages to change. Just strange because I restarted everything just before the show. Anyway, yeah. My view is more along the lines of I think there is. Well, first of all, I think there is a deep state to a degree, and I think it differs from country to country and region to region. Um, and I notice you didn't push back on the fact that there may not be a deep state. So obviously you believe in a deep state too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
Somebody says Ray says that's quite good. I think Ed has used every trigger word to get on the radar. You know, when you're doing your memes and things. Yeah, I think you're probably right, Ray. Yeah, but I think, well, I don't think we really had a deep state until after the Second World War. I think um, in the US, right? In the US, I don't think we had a deep state until after the Second World War. I think what happened was we had corporations that were working to their own ends. We had very influential rich people that were working to their own ends, and they were influencing politicians. But I don't think it was organized as any kind of deep state.
But what about sort of the old boys networks that we
Mhm.
have here and
Well,
things like, I mean,
this is where
Skull and Bones, for
well,
example,
yeah, but this is where we
in the
differ.
US?
But this is where the countries differ to a degree, right? Okay, so you have I mean, it's like Freemasonry, right? Does Freemasonry rule the world, or does it? Is it really just right? Let's put it this way: see if I was ruling the world, okay? See, I was some kind of mad evil genius, and I was at the top of the tree, and I was pulling the strings behind everything. I'd allow Freemasons to pretend that they thought that they had influence and stuff like that because they're a useful diversionary tactic, aren't they? You know, they really are useful idiots because they're out there with their funny aprons on, their one rolled up trouser leg and their strange handshakes, right? Thinking they're in some big secret club that everybody knows about. So I would leave them be, and then I'd, as you said, I'd be behind the curtain and I'd just be completely anonymous. And I think we had those kind of people, but I think they were always working for their own ends, like the Rothschilds and I mean maybe even people like Carnegie and stuff like that. You know, Edison. They were all working towards their own ends, and in America, I think the deep state really started to take root. I think when the CIA came into being, because CIA were completely unaccountable, like we touched on earlier. And I think that's the root of all evil. When nobody can call you to account, then let's not be too critical of the people that were in the CIA, because I think when they started it, they were all doing it for what they thought were the right reasons.
I think that's an important thing to mention because even to this day, I am sure that there are decent people in MI6,
Yeah.
MI5, CIA, in all of these organizations. There are good people that are doing what's probably quite a difficult job and are doing it for what they feel are honest,
Mhm.
good reasons, wanting to help their country. They can be patriots.
Yeah.
And I feel sorry for them sometimes because I feel like the people above them in the food chain who basically give them their little orders and they keep them in their need to know little boxes, and don't give them the full picture.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are the really evil ones
Yeah.
because they're the ones that are, because they're not just it's like they're not just planning coups in other countries and potentially it's like what happened to Gaddafi. I mean, he was brutally murdered.
Yeah. He was. Yeah.
Um, but I'm not sure that the people that are um,
I'm not sure the
lower down in
people.
the pecking
Yeah.
order.
See the people that actually murdered Gaddafi. I quite firmly believe they don't actually know why they murdered them,
Probably not.
because they get caught up in a situation, you know. So they basically became a mob that was
Mm.
unruly, and all they had to do was take out the leader. What the freaking hell is going on? Why does this keep pausing? I don't understand this. This is
What's that?
bizarre.
Is it the stream that pauses?
Well, it's not. It seems to be OBS is pausing, right? But I'm not dropping frames or anything like that. The connection's solid. It's just bizarre. It's the deep state. They're coming to get us.
Well, I sometimes wonder this. I mean, Ryan at the Last American Vagabond's always having problems with his IT systems, and I don't know. Maybe it's who knows. At the end of the day, maybe we're just being paranoid, or maybe they really are out to get us.
Yeah, well, maybe they are. I mean, so yeah, I think, and there's a difference between, and some of you guys are going on to other things in the chat, but there's a difference between organized gangs, and the deep state. So the deep state, while they may indulge in criminal activity, they have the pretense of being, working for the government, working for the good of the country, whereas criminal gangs are really just trying to make money for themselves at the expense of anyone and everyone. So you can't really compare criminal gangs to the deep state, except maybe in methods. Sometimes the methods are very similar,
Yeah, and sometimes the outcomes of what they do are just as heinous. Because I mean, and actually, sometimes criminal gangs seem quite nice by comparison, because I mean, all they do is rob and rape on a small scale, whereas the deep state engineers it so that these things happen on a massive scale.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's the American deep state, and I think it's a very different animal from the British deep state. I don't think they're. I think the American deep state is rooted among the CIA and the military-industrial complex. It's probably less corporate than you might think. I think it's more embedded in the government, but it's the part of the government that's unaccountable. And you see them; they have these huge congressional, investigations, and they always turn up loads and loads of stuff. But ultimately, some patsy like Ollie North or whatever gets done for it, and everybody else gets away with it, and nobody really gets pulled up for it.
Well, there's only been one investigation into the CIA in its history, and that was the Church Committee in 1979. And that was Senator Frank Church, who, I mean, the stuff that came out during that completely shocked America, shocked the world.
Yeah.
I mean, there was an awful lot of things that we now sort of take for granted in terms of rabbit hole exploration that are actually thanks to what came out of the Church Committee.
Yeah, because look at MK Ultra. I mean, that was a real thing, The spirit world investigations, they were all drug fueled escapades into trying to crack into other dimensions, and you might think that's just a rabbit hole, but it wasn't. That was the government was actively researching that under the guise of the CIA. Men that stare at goats is based on a true story. I mean, what they were up to is just incredible.
Absolutely, and it happened in Canada as well. I think it's the University of Toronto, and there's all sorts of medical doctors that were secretly involved with them and were doing all sorts of off-the-book experiments with psychedelics and all kinds of. I mean, it's the tentacles of the CIA, particularly, reach everywhere.
Yeah,
I mean that there's.
And one of those things is, if you look back at faith in government in the 50s and 60s, 77% of the people in America had complete and utter faith in their government, that they were doing the right things and were making the right decisions, regardless of who was in power. But by the time Obama and Trump came into power, it's down to like 15%. Nobody thinks the government's doing the right thing anymore. And the same thing has happened over here. There we go. We seem to have paused again. Is it pausing on the stream, guys? I don't know why. Encoding overload. Turn down the video settings. What the hell is going on?
Is it my fire?
It's not you, no. I haven't changed anything. This is what gets me. I hate
Deep
OBS.
deep state gremlins.
I mean,
Well, it's not pausing for the guys, so let's just keep going.
right? Okay,
And
let's just.
if you see it pausing, just
No,
restart it. Or
the stream is pausing, right? So the stream is pausing,
all right,
which is bizarre. But anyway,
technology, eh?
I just don't understand. I don't understand. I just don't understand. The problem is, to change the settings in OBS, you've got to stop the stream. And if you stop the stream, there's a good chance that you're not getting back on the same stream. So we'll just let it run. If there's pauses, I can only apologise. Right. So
We'll just blame the deep state.
yeah, I think it's got to be something.
Did you ever hear of a British diplomat called Carn Ross? I think it's Carn or Can. I'm not Carne. I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce it. But he's a former senior British diplomat and raised concerns about a potential deep state in the UK, suggesting that there may be forces within government bureaucracy covering up mistakes and denying access to critical documents. Interestingly, Labour basically dismiss the whole notion of a deep state, which I find deeply suspicious.
Yeah.
But as we were talking about before the show, and I mean, you're free to disagree with me, but I strongly think that if you look at what happened with Liz Truss, now I don't particularly like the woman. I don't particularly think she would have made a very good prime minister, but the way that suddenly the economy started tanking after they released a budget that clearly someone didn't like, and there was obvious manipulation going on, and it effectively led to one of the shortest prime ministerships in UK history.
Yeah.
And that just
I've got my
stuff. I mean, stuff like
theories
that doesn't happen by accident.
No,
And
I don't think it does. I think you're right. It doesn't happen by accident. But I think my theory for it is, and it's quite simple. Right? Rishi Sunak's nose was right out of joint. Rishi Sunak was formerly the Chancellor of the Exchequer and had been for some time. Rishi Sunak also had a number of connections in the city. Rishi Sunak made a few phone calls and pulled strings to get a run on the pound or whatever it was that happened.
I completely that's totally not outside the realms of possibility.
I think Rishi Sunak engineered that in order to get rid of Liz so he could step in.
That particular explanation does kind of fit Occam's razor, rather than there being some. But then, I mean, Rishi Sunak is clearly in league with other far more powerful people.
See, I think UK is different from the USA. I think we've had a deep state longer, and I think part of it revolves around the royal family, right? Because I think they're more involved than they purport to be. Because they're not supposed to be politically involved, but I think they very much are. And I think they're still thinking they're pulling strings behind the scenes, and we've got I think we've got a number of big companies and financiers in the UK that are pulling strings behind the scenes as well. I think
there's also those really old families as well.
Yeah, because, exactly. I mean, like the Rothschilds.
Yeah, and I mean going back further, the Medicis, and going back to the Italian black nobility. But here's an interesting one regarding MI6 that I can't remember where I read it, but the author was essentially hypothesizing that the Rothschild family used to have the largest intelligence network in Europe.
Yeah.
And one of the stories that I've heard, it may well be apocryphal, I don't know, but at the Battle of Waterloo, Rothschild, I don't know, I think it was Nathan Rothschild, had spies at the Battle of Waterloo. And as soon as it was clear that Napoleon was going to win, these spies hightailed it to Calais and then over to Dover. And Rothschild supposedly was waiting in his carriage for the information, went back to London and started selling gilts, the UK government bonds.
Yeah.
And then all of the other, because at the time the stock exchange was basically a big trading floor with all loads of rich men in suits kind of talking to each other and
Yeah.
doing things the old-fashioned way. And they all realized that Rothschild was selling gilts and thought, because he was known for knowing things before other people, and they figured that he'd got some information that Napoleon had won and that Wellington had been vanquished, and they all started selling. Price went down, and then
Rothschild started buying, did he?
Basically, through his agent, started buying it all. And some claim that was the day that he bought the British government. I mean, I have heard.
It's possible.
I've heard. I think James Corbett did a hit piece on that theory. I can't remember the details of it. So it's not, like I said, it may or may not be true. But then when the Second World War started, the Rothschild intelligence network through Europe, all of their spies and couriers and all these people were essentially rolled up into MI6, and that there's been very, very high level connections between particularly the Rothschild family and the security services.
Yeah.
But I think in England, like you said, I think it's a lot older. I think if we go back hundreds of years to when the kings and queens of England had much more power than they do now, I think that there are also other nobles. That it's not just the royal family. There's the other important families, like the really rich ones.
You're 100% right, Ed, because I think people forget that England has only been a country for a couple of, for a few centuries, really. Because before that it was broken up into smaller fiefdoms and things, and the same with Scotland. That was full of different clans and stuff like that, and they really didn't get together as a coherent country until late 15th, early 16th century, that kind of thing. So the place wasn't as coherent as you think it was, and it wasn't that far behind the founding of the states, really, when you think about it. I'm going to say something that the chat might not like, and people might think is a bit controversial. I think the WEF is a red herring. I don't think it has the power that anyone ascribes to it. I think it's just there as a figurehead organisation, a bit like the Freemasons, to throw you off and just to give you something to talk about. I don't think they wield any kind of power at all in real terms.
I'd say that I do, in principle, I agree with you about 75%. I think that I do agree that the WEF is nowhere near as powerful as those of us in our community like to say it is, me included.
Yeah.
Nor do I think Klaus Schwab is some sort of all-powerful Bond villain, even though he bloody looks like it.
He does.
I think that there's a certain amount of... It's almost... because, I mean, the WEF has been around since the 70s, and I think that it does serve a purpose for them recruiting and training their nasty little minions, like the Trudeaus and the Arderns. And basically, they seem to pick the most dishonest, brainless, compromised morons, build them up to make them out to feel like they're something they're not, like Macron, give them loads of power, but basically they're eminently controllable because they have loads of dirt or whatever it is. I mean, we all know about now it's common knowledge because of Epstein that there are these sexual blackmailing kind of control rings out there of every kind of description that operate everywhere. Like even in the entertainment industry, look at what happened to Kanye West and that creepy weirdo. What was his name? Harley Pasternak, I think.
Right.
He's some sort of personal trainer, and I mean it's a show in and of itself. But he was the one that basically, to paraphrase him, told Kanye to behave himself, or he was gonna drug him up to the eyeballs and make sure that his life was pretty much destroyed. And so there are these controllers, there are these people out there behind the scenes who
Right.
are
So
manipulating the politicians. And I think Schwab is probably a
he's trying,
low-level
maybe.
gopher.
Yeah, but okay. So if that's happening, okay, what is the benefit to them for this?
Because they have to have a public face.
No, but
That's the thing that they
how do they benefit from what's going on? How do they benefit?
who specifically benefits? Do you
Well,
mean
the controllers.
minions?
No, the controllers. How do the controllers benefit from bringing countries down? Because every country appears to be going down in a downward spiral. Every Western country, right?
Because you can't build back better until you've broken everything.
How are you going to build back better when you've not got any money left and people are disillusioned and fighting each other?
But they want to bring in central bank digital currencies, and they want this whole electronic control grid that
It
we've
just
all been
seems-
talking about for ages. But the thing about the CBDCs is they don't actually have to do anything. The economy is, I mean, if you only have to look at the US debt, national debt graph over the last 5 years, and it's gone stratospheric. It's now an exponential thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a simple matter of mathematics and time that particular Ponzi scheme is going to collapse, and they have to, in order to maintain their control, they have to replace it with something, and they've always wanted world government.
Okay, right. But there's...
And I think me personally, just to finish off, I think that I think ultimately it's all about world government, because when you read through the stuff that people like Kissinger are talking about, and Zbigniew Brzezinski, and all of these sort of deep state people, the focus has always been control, power, and world government for like at least 100 years. So I think that's the ultimate aim behind destroying all of the countries, because they want people desperate and begging for a solution. And they want everyone hating their national governments, because you can't have a world government if everyone is still loyal to their countries. And it's I don't know. Things have to be. People have to be made desperate. It's like with
But they're not
COVID.
They're not doing a very good job then, are they, really? Because they're stirring up nationalism, not dampening it down.
Well, I think it's an unintended consequence, but I think it's also,
Or is this
I
just...
don't know.
Is
At
this...
the end of the day, they're not that bright, and they don't necessarily understand the universe in the way that they think they do. And I don't think that everything always goes according to plan for them.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think what you've got is a group of people who think they know how to manage things and think they know how to stir things up, and through places like the EU, like the bureaucratic heads of the EU, the ones that aren't strictly speaking elected. They're elected by the member countries and not by the people of the member countries. Not the MEPs. The MEPs are elected by the people of the member countries. But then there's this other group of bureaucrats who are appointed. So, like Ursula von der Leyen isn't elected; she's appointed by the. Well, she's German, isn't she?
Yeah, I think it was Merkel. Merkel, she was a useless Secretary of Defense. Merkel wanted to get rid of her, and
so she's appointed. She's appointed to the EU, so she gets paid more than the British Prime Minister does, and she has effectively unaccountable power. And I think this is where the problem begins again. And it's when people have unaccountable power, you cannot trust their motives, because even if they think they're doing something for the good of the country, then just because they think they're doing something right doesn't stop them from actually committing evil acts.
Absolutely. And ultimately it subverts the whole notion of what democracy is supposed to be about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we're actually looking at the textbook definition of what the deep state is, it could be argued that the European Commission is it's a legitimized, institutionalized deep state that's actually been put in charge of running European affairs.
Yeah, I think it is.
And they're doing a really bloody bad job of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can only apologise for the pausing, people. It seems to pause for a few seconds. I do not, because everything here, the CPU is running at 0.8%, so I'm not using any. Well, what the hell's going on?
That's technology for you.
That is technology.
This is why we can't go cashless.
Well, you can't. What was it? Greg's was shut the other day because they couldn't take they couldn't take money, wasn't it? No, Sainsbury's have been down. Greg's have been down. You know, I mean, and you think about it. If Greg's has to shut all its branches because it can't process any money, how much did that cost them?
You know? Lots.
Yeah, even
lots
if it's
lots
just
and lots.
Even if it's just for a day, it's still a staggering amount of money.
It does make you wonder though if there's not something, because we're still due a fake alien invasion, and we're still due some cyber polygon as well.
Cyber polygon.
Cyber Polygon. It was that exercise. It was a World Economic Forum cybersecurity exercise, like a year.
Yeah.
I think it was about a year, almost exactly a year ago, that they had their thing.
Yeah.
And it's never come back. But it's also, I mean, the other thing that we have to bear in mind is that our parent star is particularly active at the moment, and the planet's geomagnetic field is a lot weaker than it has been in the past. So we've got less protection. So you would think that if it was something bigger like that it would be over a bigger area and would have impacted Europe and not just us. But I mean, if it was hackers, who knows? I mean, it could. I don't know. Once when we were first starting up the company that I work for, we lost connectivity one afternoon, and it just everything went, and there was no phones, there was no internet, and it was basically someone laying a water pipe that had put a JCB digger through an optic fiber line.
Happens all the time.
And yeah, so, but then, I mean, for these big companies like Greg's, you would think that, particularly payment systems, could it be the banks? Could it? Because I mean, ultimately, the payment systems and stuff go through banks. So
yeah, I mean, let's face it. I've worked for banks, okay, and they're nowhere near as stringent as they really think they are. You know, especially when it comes to software, because 99% of the banks get all their software coding done in India. I mean, they really do, and it's frightening because the problem is you're trying to manage these guys to produce a product, and half the time you can't understand a word they're saying, and the other half of the time they are actively lying to you because they just tell you what you want to hear. Indians are possibly some of the hardest people to work with from a Western society point of view. It's just incredible. And that might sound racist, but it's not. It's a cultural thing. Yeah, it's a cultural thing. Because do you remember Karachi Cops that used to be on TV? You remember that?
Never saw that.
Karachi Cops was a thing that was set in, I think it was Bombay or something. Well, that's not even a politically correct term these days, is it? But anyway, whatever city it was set in, maybe it was Karachi. But anyway, when they arrested people, they would beat them to get a confession out of them, and they would keep beating them until they were, very well beaten, because they knew that they would just lie. Let's pause again. Right, that's it back. It just seems to get unbelievable. I don't understand this. How can encoding be overloaded when the CPU is sitting at 1%? It's just bizarre. Anyway.
Did you didn't have an update to OBS or anything,
Nope.
did you?
Nope, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed.
Very strange.
Even was it last week we didn't even get the Dalek? Remember?
Yeah, Gremlins. They're messing with us.
Yeah, they are.
There's someone.
Anyway,
Someone's.
yeah. So Karachi cops would beat people because they knew that the first thing that was coming out their mouth was going to be a lie. So they would just keep beating them until they effectively got something that they think tied in with truth.
Yeah. I mean, it's humanity really is a brutish, thuggish, primitive species.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And you know it's quite. Sometimes it's quite hard to figure out what the hell's going on because there's just so much. What would you call it? It's like there's so much evil in the world, really, isn't there? It really is.
I think there's a lot of good out there as well. The problem is that evil shouts a lot louder, whereas good tends to. The really good people are the ones that tend to just work very quietly in the background doing their thing, and they do it relentlessly and untiringly. And ultimately, I think it's that persistence. Whereas evil has to get attention, and it has to shout really loudly, and it has to be it has to be the loudest voice in the room.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but I don't necessarily claim to know how the universe works, but I do know or believe one thing, which is that the universe strives for balance. If you look at the way that the planet works, everything is about balance, and it's all it's like not so much humans, but most animals are very much in balance with their surroundings. I mean, it's like elephants and stuff won't necessarily strip an entire tree down. They'll obviously leave a little bit
Yeah.
To grow back for next year. And it's only humans that seem to be this rampaging bunch of crazy people that are quite happy murdering each other.
Yes, I know. Right? Yes,
Well, no, I agree. I mean, it's a generalization, but
yeah, as a generalization. I mean, you
this
see
is
all
the
these
world in 2024.
you see all these lovely videos of people on Twitter and things like that with animals, and you know the animals are always being nice to each other. You know, like dogs and cats liking each other, and you know wolves rescuing Bambi and things like this nonsense. Okay, and you see all this, and I'm sure this happens on occasion, right? But the best one I saw recently was a guy who came across two rabbits on the road, and one of them had been run over and killed. The other rabbit was standing beside it, and the guy comes up and he's going, "Oh," he says, "It's gone, mate, it's gone." And the other rabbit's sitting beside it, so he pulls the dead rabbit off the side of the road, and the other rabbit hops after him and starts shagging the dead rabbit. And the guy's like, "Oh man, you brutal man."
Oh dear.
Yeah.
That's where rabbits get their bad reputation from.
Expectation versus reality.
Necrophiliac rabbits. Oh dear. Yeah, but I mean, ultimately, that's the thing about the world, though, is that there is that. And I mean, in terms of what we're talking about in the deep state, do we think that there's a good version of the deep state that is working for good, or do we think that it's all just a bunch of evil little so-and-sos?
I genuinely believe, right, that there is a mixed bag of people in there. I think there are people in there that think they're doing right, that think they're working towards a better world, and they think they're making a difference. Now, whether they are or not is open for... Paused again.
No,
So
I'm still here.
yeah, I know you're still here, but the stream going out pauses. So anyway, so whether they're making a difference or not is open to interpretation, right? There are obviously there is obviously going to be people out there as well who are working for nobody but themselves. And I think what happens is generally the deep state, because it's unaccountable, tends to favour the people that are just looking out for themselves. Because if there's no accountability, how do you pull them up? And that's the thing. You know, that there are certain types of people. Once you give them an inch, they are taking 100 miles. They're not stopping. So, and those are the kind of people that thrive in a kind of deep state environment. I think that's what happens. I really do. And I think the good people that are in that kind of, I mean, like, even if you go down to basic civil servants, even people working for councils and things, there's good people and bad people in there. And people that don't get held to account, they just rampage through the systems. They really do.
But that's why the deep state is such a dangerous thing.
Exactly.
In whatever form it's in, because if you don't have that accountability, and if you have the CIA causing coups in one country after another one, and actually working against the interests of the American people or the British people or the French people or whichever deep state is doing whatever piece of naughtiness.
Yeah.
It just seems, I don't know, it seems like the bad ones surface to the top.
Oh yeah, they do, because they're not held to account. That's a problem. And people who are doing things right that aren't held to account don't ever get the vindication that sometimes they maybe want, and they never get brought to the top, because the bad ones will always push them aside. But then you've got the other thing. You've got the actual state itself who is doing evil. I mean, look at France, for instance, with Niger. They had that contract for yellow cake, which is uranium. France has got something like 58 nuclear power stations, so they need a shitload of yellow cake. So Niger produces it, and France gets it for almost nothing, because they had this long-standing agreement, and that's what caused the big furore last year. Remember when Niger effectively flung France out, and now they've just flung the US out as well.
I can't say I blame them. I mean,
no, I don't blame them either, because they've been ripped off for decades.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's high time that Africa started using its resources for itself. I mean, there's no more colonialism, and I think this is something that hopefully, something good that will hopefully come out of the whole dreadfulness in Ukraine is ultimately the end of the US as the global hegemon. And this concept of a multipolar world that the Chinese and the Russians and Brazilians and South Africans and all of these people are advocating, I think its time has come, and I think that Niger booting the French out, apart from being really hilarious, and really that must have really wound Macron up, and then the whole Ukraine thing, you can see why his fragile little ego's having problems with the whole thing. And then they're all accusing his wife of what as well, and is it the wife or the husband? Who knows? But it's I don't know. When you look at the caliber of leadership that we've got in the West compared to, I mean, Russia, China, I mean, even places like South Africa, because that.
See, I think you've got to be very careful as well, though, because Russia's not a panacea for all good. No,
I don't.
It's got its problems, and Putin has his issues as well, and Xi in particular, you got to watch him. A lot of people disappear in China, a lot.
And Modi's no angel either.
A lot,
India.
yeah, a lot.
I definitely don't like Lula in Brazil.
Paused again. Stream going out has paused. Right, there you go. We're back. So yeah, G's no angel. Lulu, as you said, he's a dubious character. I'm not convinced about this guy in Argentina either.
Oh no, crazy man! I don't
Yeah,
like him at all. Millet, no,
yeah.
he's. And I don't. I mean, I don't like Melon in Italy either.
Oh no, no, no.
But no, Millet, he's.
What's going on in Wales? This guy Giffen seems to be a right tosspot.
I've got no. I mean, I have no idea who he even is. I could barely even pronounce his name. But after, I mean, Drakeford, someone someone equally bad. I mean, Labour in Wales just seems to be a complete disaster area. If we translate that to a Keir Starmer government, it's going to be horrific. I mean, it's yeah. I suspect. I don't know. I was joking about it with a friend the other night, and I'm almost tempted to vote Tory because just better the devil you bloody know.
See, this is a thing because the polls are showing that the Tories are going to get wiped out effectively, but polls are almost invariably wrong, especially if you base your polls on by-election results. Because
Yeah, but
people change their mind at elections. Now, they're now talking about the election being in October. I think they're pushing it back. Obviously, they're wanting to delay the inevitable as long as they can. But here's the thing I don't get, Ed, right? Here's the thing I don't get. Because it's not hard to see. If you sit back and passionately and look at it, the Tories don't seem to be doing anything constructive that would enable them to turn things around and to get more votes, right? So why are they trying to throw the election? Because that's what it seems to be like.
I don't think they've got any ideas. I don't think they're basically they're boxed in by a bunch of other stuff, things like all of the net zero nonsense, and I think that I think they're boxed in by the deep state to a certain extent. Um, and I
Well,
don't understand it either. But I also
so if there is
equally
a deep state, right, the deep state shouldn't care who's in power. As long as you've got the goodies on people, doesn't
I
matter.
don't think they do.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't change. If you look at
It
what
doesn't
happened
change.
with the Blair government, Blair came in the late 90s, and
Yeah.
everyone hated the previous Tory government. I mean, we'd had Margaret Thatcher, and then we'd had very like John Major, and the whole economy was in the doldrums. And Blair
Yeah.
comes in with all of this. He was a bit like Obama in
Yeah.
terms of this vacuous hope and change,
Yep.
and at the time we were all much more naive than we are now, but people bought into that, and
I don't think the WIF. Well,
it's
sorry, I'm just touching on the. I don't think the WIF run anything. I really don't. I think you're ascribing too much power to the WIF that they don't actually have.
I don't think they run anything, but I think they also to say that, as I said before, to say that they have no power is also inaccurate. I don't think that they are the all-powerful force that some people like to think they are,
Yeah.
but they're also they're not completely without power, and
Yeah.
I think that
And
decisions that are made in, say, Bilderberg meetings and places like that, the places, because if the WEF was really powerful, we would not know about them.
exactly. Anyway, and sorry to go back to where you were talking about the deep state, and in this case, we're talking about the UK. So I think the deep state that we're concentrating on at this moment in time is probably the higher levels of the civil service, the higher levels of the security services, and the royal family and corporations. I think they're basically running the country, and the politicians kind of dancing to their tune because I think the one thing that people forget about sometimes in the UK is here we go again. Fucking hell. don't understand this. I really don't understand it. It's really driving me nuts. This pausing business. But anyway, the one thing that people I think forget about in the UK as well is the House of Lords. They're all unelected peers.
Yeah, that was.
The old boys club, right enough, in plain sight.
I think it's been made worse because I think in its original formulation, the House of Lords was all the hereditary peers, and it was all the old landowners and stuff like that. And those guys, yeah, they had their own internecine issues and stuff and they weren't particularly good people. But you get the impression that they had a little bit more honor. And even if it was honor amongst thieves,
yeah,
it feels like to put it mildly, I think that the title Right Honourable that we give all of our MPs, they're becoming less honourable by the year, and they're also becoming less right by the year.
Never been honourable.
It's like if you look at some of those old politicians. I mean, George Galloway exemplifies this. I don't agree with a lot of what he says.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure I necessarily particularly like him, but I do respect him on because he's that old school Tony Benn type socialist. And
he's a fly by night. He jumps onto the next thing. I mean, he jumped into the Muslim camp because it's going to get him elected. Before that,
he has a track record of support for not just the Palestinians, but I mean, he was heavily involved in the anti-apartheid campaigns of the 80s. And like I said, I'm not trying to. I'm not endorsing George Galloway by any stretch of the imagination. The point that I'm trying to make is that it just seems like the latest generation of politicians just seem to be in it for themselves, and they have their masters, and they have their interests and the people that they are paying their bills. It's like you can tell over the last 4 or 5 months who's paying Keir Starmer's re-election bill, just based on his policies relating to a certain part of the world that we don't necessarily want to get sucked into on this show. But it's like we were saying earlier. I think there's multiple levels of deep state, and I think some of them are more directly connected to government, like these high-level civil servants. And I think some of them are indirectly connected to government in the sense that they are extremely rich and powerful people like Bill Gates and George Soros and some of these philanthro-capitalist billionaires who are basically, this whole notion that you can give your money away and still make money. It's kind of... But they also completely work in secret. And I mean, if you look at someone like Bill Gates, the amount of influence that guy has over the media and politicians, and the fact that he can pretty much fly into any country, and if he needs one, he'll get an audience with whoever the head of state is, or whichever minister, if he needs to talk to someone about buying up loads of farmland or whatever. That he's the kind of person that can just go in and do that, and nobody says a word. And the only way we know he's there is because of that Twitter account that tracks his plane.
Yeah.
But then he's got like 4 of them, so we don't necessarily know which one he's actually on. But this is actually a good question for you. How does Bill, and potentially the audience as well, but how does people like Bill Gates and George Soros fit into the whole deep state?
Well, I don't think they do.
That we've been talking about.
Yeah, I don't think they're part of it. I really don't. I don't think they're in it at all. I think they're on the periphery. I think they are, but they're not. And this is...
Yeah, but surely the money gives them more power.
Oh, how? How does their money give them power?
Because Money does, because money lets you buy things. Money
We're
lets you buy
frozen again.
people.
Frozen again.
Money,
Hold on.
well, money lets you
Hold
buy
on.
information.
Right, we're
Oh,
back. Right, so I think the question was how does Bill Gates and Soros and all that fit into the thing? And my view is they don't, because basically I think they're on the periphery, and I think they are acting as they think they're philanthropists. They think they're helping people.
I don't think Bill Gates thinks he's a philanthropist.
Oh,
But, I mean,
I
he's
think he
got his
does.
agenda.
No, I think.
And
Well,
yeah,
what's his agenda? What's his agenda then?
he's a eugenicist. Simple as. He's
Well,
probably extremely
right,
happy about the news that the world's population's
right.
fallen for the first time.
Let's talk about the world's population then. Have you seen that? Have you seen that guy that did that video about where are all the people, right? And I haven't examined it, and I did ask Adam to have a look at it, but like normal, he just went off and played with AI instead.
Oh, but John, the whole thing about population, the reason the eugenicists don't want a big population, all of that Malthusian carrying capacity stuff was all nonsense, and they knew it. It's about control, because
No, I understand that, but what I'm trying to get to is how much of a population do we actually have? Because nobody actually knows. Because if you start counting up the amount of people that's supposed to live in cities and things like that, there's an awful lot of people have to live in farmland that can't support all those people because we don't have any houses on the farmland, you know. But apart from that, right, what's Bill Gates got to gain from getting rid of people?
that's a very good question.
I mean, I know what's his name, Boris Johnson's dad. He's a bit of a eugenicist as well. Right?
But Bill Gates, I mean, when you talk about, I think it was an interview that I saw with Gates, where he's actually describing his family dinners when they were kids, and he and his sister used to sit around the dinner table, and I think he said that their father would pose questions that they would all kind of discuss and debate, and that one of them frequently was about the fact that there's too many people on the planet, and also
Yeah,
Boris Johnson's father. And I mean,
yeah,
not all of these eugenicists are quite as open about it as Stanley Johnson.
yeah.
But
I think the whole "there's too many people on the planet" thing doesn't stack up to investigation. I think
I don't think it does either.
it really doesn't. And yes, people are starving, but that's nothing to do with the amount of people that we've got. That's to do with the way the local systems are corrupted and mismanaged.
It's also allocation of resources and a large amount of screwing around by the deep state. I think this is somewhere that it's another.
Well, yes, yes and no, right? I mean, you know the cost of doing business in Africa, right? You know, you send something to Africa, you've got to send 3 of them because 2 of them aren't getting through.
Not always.
Okay,
sometimes.
Okay. most of the time, right? So I think there's an awful lot of corruption in some of these places, and the other problem is there's a civil war going on amongst, you know, especially in Central Africa. There's a civil war going on amongst 2 religions, that nobody seems to want to pay attention to. But
other than that's West Africa rather than Central Africa.
Right. Okay, but there are a lot of people dying.
Well, you're talking about Nigeria.
Nigeria and the Congo as well. I think Congo's kind of central, is it not?
Yeah, and I mean the thing with Africa is it's an interesting one because that's ultimately it's the fault of the Europeans, because if you look at, let's just take a country like Zambia, which is actually one of the more peaceful countries in Africa. They never had a civil war. I mean, their battle for independence was basically a bunch of demonstrations, and then the Brits decided to leave. But even Zambia has got its tribal thing. There's a lot of tribalism in Zambia, and but the problem with that is because of the Europeans going in there and defining the borders and in a lot of cases,
we're
defining the
paused
borders
again.
as such a
Paused again. Right, we're back.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the big problems with Africa is the fact that the Europeans went in and divided the borders up according to what suited their interests and not according to natural borders. I mean, it's like if you take the case of Zambia, it's the size of most of Western Europe, and if you look at the issues that we've had trying to have any kind of European unity between the French and, say, the Germans.
Yeah.
Now, Zambia's got 5 main languages. The people up north speak a language called Bemba. Hang on, let me finish. People down south speak a language called Tonga. Now, to a European ear, they sound very similar, but those two people can't understand each other. And it's like the French and the Germans. And you splat all these tribes together in one country, in some cases where the tribes are openly hostile. And in other cases like Rwanda and Burundi, where you had the French influence, what they did to control them is you've got 2 tribes, the Hutus and the Tutsis, the Hutus and the Tutsis. And the way that they split Rwanda and Burundi up is you have minorities in each one. And that creates problems.
Yes, that's fine. But the only point I'm trying to get across is there are problems, okay? Right? Regardless of who caused them or however, there are big problems in Africa, right? That nobody's addressing.
Well, there's big problems in Europe as well, and we have corruption here too. I mean, to say that it's Africans are corrupt, I mean...
I know you've got a soft spot for Africa, right? But I think generally, it's slightly more corrupt. Generally.
Yes, but it's also much more obvious. The thing that I've always thought about Europeans is they're basically European governments are just as corrupt, but they've been getting away with it for a lot longer, and they're much better at it.
Possibly. But anyway, right. So your long-winded explanation of the problems in Africa has completely made me lose my train of thought. Sometimes I think this is your game.
I don't do it deliberately. I just talk the hind legs off the donkey if you give me half a chance.
Right. Where the hell? What were we talking about? Anyway, right. There's a couple of things actually.
Deep state.
Well, we were talking about deep state. There's a couple of things actually that I want to ask Janet, who said a couple of things. Pardon me. Is Janet one of your followers? I don't think I've seen Janet before.
She might be. Name doesn't ring any bells.
Right. So Janet comes up with the WEF have infiltrated. Why is this not? Hold on. All right. Okay. The WEF have infiltrated everywhere on behalf of their masters. So you need to be able to explain who their masters are. You can't just say deep state. You have to be able to explain who their masters are if you're going to make statements like that.
Like Klaus Schwab's masters?
Yeah.
Well, you just have to look at his history, because Klaus Schwab was basically groomed by Kissinger.
Yeah, but
and
you
Kissinger himself was. I'm not sure who was behind Kissinger, but Kissinger wasn't. I mean, he was a very well-known, powerful, influential person.
Yeah, right.
But he had other people behind him.
So the next statement that I want to address is money is power, says Janet. And that doesn't necessarily follow, right? Because if you look at the richest man in the world on paper, which is Elon Musk, I don't think he's got anywhere near the power of certain other individuals that have probably quite a bit less money than he has.
It's what you do with the money rather than the money itself.
Yeah.
But also Elon, I mean, Musk is actually a front man. I mean, Musk gets an awful lot of, if you look at Starlink.
What do you think of Musk? What do you, tell me honestly, what do you think of Musk?
I don't quite know what to think of him. I know.
Do you think he's a
savior
of a potential savior of the human race by taking us all to Mars?
No, I don't think. Apart from the fact that he still hasn't adequately explained how he's going to get people to Mars through the Van Allen belt. But I mean that's just a sore
well,
point that I've got. But
oh, we're
that
fucking
aside,
frozen again. Let's just do my nothing. Right, go on. We're back. So how
well,
we
I
get
think.
people through the Van Allen belts to start with? Yep.
Well, I mean, the whole point is that I don't think that we've got any business going to other planets until we sort out our shit here at home. Otherwise, I mean, the current state of the human race, we just need to stay on this little planet and get ourselves to a point where we're just a little bit more civilized than we
Well,
are at the moment.
well, let's actually think about that, because if you think about how we behaved in the past, kind of explored our way out of issues before, haven't we?
I thought we had. I
Yeah,
thought
well,
we'd resolved a whole bunch of stuff at the end of World War II, but
yeah,
I guess
no,
not.
but we keep exploring other lands and countries and moving into them, and we think we're exploring ourselves out of issues. Maybe if we did that with another planet where there aren't any living things, things might start to get better. No, no.
But we don't necessarily. I mean, we could get to Mars and realize that there's 150 million different things under the sands of Mars,
The
that every single
ghosts,
one of which likes to feast on human flesh,
the
and we don't
ghosts of
actually realize it
Mars.
until we get there.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I mean, it's.
the other thing,
I don't.
the other thing about Musk that I don't get is, I mean, have you seen him crowing about the test flights of Starship?
Yeah.
Right, which is yet to be able to land. And now, while I can applaud being able to take off, getting back down is pretty critical if you want to land on Mars.
But it's. I don't know. The thing about Musk is that on if you look at him on Twitter, he tries to be some sort of guardian of freedom of speech. But there's I mean, Twitter is no less free than it was before. It's just not quite as easy to get suspended.
Yeah,
And I think part of the reason for that is that the powers that be, the deep state, whoever, realized that it's much easier for them if we're all spouting off on Twitter rather than if we're all spouting off on different social networks like Truth Social and Getter and
well,
all of these other
yeah,
places,
yeah.
and having the conversation in one place so that it can be monitored and they can run all of their analytics on it. And I'm sure they do sentiment analysis and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's the censorship on Twitter feels like it's much more underhanded now,
Yeah, yeah,
and
it does.
they'll
It does.
do things like put it's like if you get a sex bot posting something like pussy in bio, it for some reason, as soon as that appears in a tweet thread, the reach just plummets. And people are still being suspended for spurious reasons.
Yeah.
But it's also the whole lawful but awful, where we're all just kept in our
Hmm.
boxes, and there are certain people who get amplified.
Well, here,
Usually, people that Musk likes.
yeah. So here's something that we haven't touched on that I think is an integral part of the deep state. But is it is it like an embedded part, or is it a peripheral part? And that's the media. Because what's going on with the media? Because the media, I always thought the media was just the the propaganda wing of the government. But is it? Is it more insidious than that? Because what's going on with Jeremy Vile right now? Why is he calling for a Chinese style control of Twitter?
Well, because he's vile,
Yeah,
frankly.
but why?
But
Why?
I mean, look, if it was up to him, they would have been, they would have been holding us all down and sticking the you know what in our arms. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
but
They
he's
would.
also one of these. He's like one of these shock jock type people who essentially makes his money by saying the most ridiculous, nasty, outrageous things, and he's fine with it because he's a ridiculous, nasty, outrageous type of character. But I think it's also about um getting people watching him because people love to be outraged. Um, I don't know. I think to go back to your first question, I think
Oh, we've paused again.
the, um,
Right, we're back. Jesus
I
Christ.
mean it's how the media figure in the deep state. I think if you think of the deep state as being networks of people rather than necessarily specific organizational structures, I think at the top level of the BBC, I mean, if you're a deep state sort of person and you're one of these rich controllery or one of these civil servants or these, I don't know, whoever we're talking about, but you would understand how important the media is, and so you would engineer it
Mm.
such that someone, whether that person was necessarily a part of your clique or not, but that person that you could manipulate and control, or someone who somehow sees the world the same way you do, even if they've not been initiated into whatever the kind of deeper levels of this stuff are. Um,
Mhm.
and so I think it is controlled, but then if you look at the BBC, a lot of it is also self-censorship because those journalists know that there are certain things they can say and there's certain things that they can't say. And instead of like rocking the boat, they all just keep their mouths shut. And the people who get promoted and the people who get the big jobs and the flash assignments and stuff are the ones who are reliable and can be relied upon to ask the right questions and elicit the right answers and never ask the questions that they're not supposed to ask.
Yeah, okay. So we've got a chat on screen here from Pink Pisces. Whoever the deep state are, they are evil. This is a spiritual world or good over evil. Simples. Well, yes, you may say that, but I think we did touch on this earlier, didn't we? That, well, certainly in my view, I think there are good and bad people in the deep state, and just
I agree.
just because they are good people doesn't necessarily mean they're not committing evil. That makes sense. It does.
No, it does make
Yeah.
sense. I think that good people can do bad things
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
because they think that they're doing good and they
Yeah.
don't understand the consequences of their actions. But going back to what Pink Pisces said, I do believe that it is a spiritual war. Now, if you'd asked me that question 5 years ago,
Mhm.
I I've come to have a very different view on the world in the last 4 years, and I'm much more inclined to believe in things that 5, 10 years ago I would have probably scoffed at a little bit.
Could we explore
Things
this a little?
like,
This spiritualism then?
sure, if we want to, I mean, we've been going for nearly an hour and a half, so
Well,
I don't know if people are still watching.
there's 27 people still on the chat, so that's
No,
pretty
that's
good.
all right.
So spiritualism or a spiritual view of things is something that, and it's something we touched on very early in the conversation, in that the CIA actually tried to break into the spirit world using drugs. And I think there's a number of religions obviously believe in this kind of spirit world. I think Hinduism, Buddhism, they're kind of into it as well, but they don't tend to advocate the use of drugs to get there, but meditation. So are you coming over to the point of view that you think there is a degree of spiritualism inherent in the world, or
Oh, I've always thought that there's spiritualism inherent in the world. I
right?
think I
Okay.
think that there is. It's like this idea of the divine,
Yeah.
or um, but I feel like I'm much more inclined to think of the world in those sorts of terms. I've never been particularly religious.
Mm-hmm.
My dad wanted us baptized, but my mum, because my dad's a Church of England, but my mum basically she was very anti-religion, for all sorts of reasons I'm not going to go into, but and so she refused to have us baptized, and we didn't go to church when we were kids and things like that. I mean, once or twice when my dad kind of insisted. But I've always I think it's very hard to
Oh, we're
actually.
paused.
Mm,
Go.
Well, I think it's very hard to exist in this world and not ultimately think that there's something bigger, that there's something, whether that's God or the universe or however you choose to describe it. But this whole concept that we were talking about a minute ago about this battle between good versus evil, some
Yeah.
sort of spiritual war almost. Um, it feels like it. I just I don't see any other way of describing what we're going
Well,
through now other
yeah.
than in the context of a big battle between good and evil.
Well, it seems to me, and I could be 100% wrong, but it seems to me that what appears to be going on just now is that the 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 media in particular appear to be trying to, and companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, and all that, they seem to be trying to convince us that there's no difference between good and evil.
Well, they're actually. I sometimes get the feeling that they're trying to convince us that evil is good and good is
Well,
evil.
yeah. That's
It's
I
like
don't want to go. I don't want to go too far initially, but it
I
does
mean, if
seem to
you
be that they seem to be trying to level the playing field in the first instance. You know,
I think
and
they've gone. I think they were. I think
you
they
think
were
they've gone
leveling the
over?
playing field back in the 80s and 90s. I think that
Okay.
was when. I think that was when they started implementing this, and where we're at now is Sam Smith. I mean, you only have to take one look at that guy, or it, or thing, or whatever the hell I'm supposed to call it, and think that there is something seriously wrong with the world where this creature is being held up as some sort of role model for kids or for
Yeah.
people generally.
You seen that?
And
You seen that other guy that kind of he wears a business suit top half and guts bottom half.
I
He has
don't
nobody, right?
know.
He's nobody, but he's a baldy dude as well. But
But also,
there's always pictures of him on Twitter, and it's really like annoying. It's like, and now he's being held up as he's just fighting for gender equality. Now, and I don't get this at all. I just
uh,
I just it's
that, that,
just
that
wrong.
it is that it's
Inherently,
another.
it's wrong. You
Yeah,
feel
it's
it in
like
your being.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's another inversion, and it's this is kind of where I get back to this. I get to this landing where the only way you can describe it is as a spiritual war, some sort of a battle between good versus evil. The sort of not quite Lord of the Rings, but it does have an epic kind of battle sort of quality to it. Especially when you think of it in terms of a battle for the mind,
Yeah.
because an awful lot of what's happened over the last 4 years and a lot of what's happening right now, it's a war for people's minds. And I mean, you and I and a lot of people in the chat and probably people who are listening that aren't engaging in the chat, we're all soldiers in that war, whether we like it or not.
Hmm.
And even if we, even if we're not really, we're just doing a little bit of shit posting on Twitter or retweeting a few things that people like, engaging with it, you've been sucked into it already. You're part of it, whether you like it or not. Um, and you only have to look at well, the other side, the evil side, because I'm planting my flag firmly on the side of good here because couldn't do it any other way. But there is real evil in this world. I mean, you only have to turn the TV on to look at it. I mean, that recent speech that Biden gave in the State of the Union, or
Hmm.
there's a darkness about Keir Starmer as well that I find super creepy. And there was a picture of him being all excited, and he was sitting there with Tony Blair, and it was the article was talking about how Starmer is talking to Blair. I mean, if you want evil, Just you're looking at it.
Yeah. There's something about Starmer that's like, it's almost like there's something missing. You know, when you look at, oh, we'll
His
pause again.
personality.
Pause again. Yeah, there's something about Starmer that there's something missing. You know, it's almost like he's vacant. There's just there's a part of him that not miss that's not right.
Hmm.
And
It's but then I think that Sunak is the same. I mean, if you look at pictures of
yeah,
Sunak,
yeah,
he
absolutely.
it's one of the. It was actually this is the reason why I started replacing Rishi Sunak's head with Roland Rat. Is because of that fake smile,
Hmm.
and it's
Mm.
the guy can't look like a real person. It's weird. Even when he's with his family in in a situation where you would think he'd be a little bit more comfortable and natural, he still has this. I don't know. It's almost like a startled rabbit in car headlights, sort of
He
weird.
does, yeah, he does.
It's like a grin that almost looks like a grimace half of the time. I
Yeah,
mean, he's a really creepy person.
he
I
is.
don't like any of them.
But
Just
do you think though that this is part of? Have you looked at the fourth turning stuff?
no.
No, you need to look at the fourth turn. You need to do a wee bit of research into that because it might be that this is part of it because this would be us on the end of the third going into the fourth, which would be the chaos, I think. Chaos. And then we'll come out of it at the other end because it seems to be a generational thing. Because if you think back to like 1930s Berlin, that was decadent. That was decadent, wasn't it? It
Mm.
was like that was the beginning of the end for Germany. That's when things started to go really wrong. And then
Same with the
obviously,
Roman Empire.
yeah, yeah, well, exactly. But it took the Romans a long time, though. I mean, they were like 500 years in decline before they actually lost it. But anyway, if you go back to like the 30s and 30s Berlin in particular, where it was so decadent, and obviously this young Austrian field painter um, was able to seize the mood of the nation and take them on a journey that probably they ultimately wish they never went on. Um, it's like, is that what's happening here? Because it seems to be a recreation of what's going on because we seem to be becoming very decadent, right? You know, with all the nonsense that's going on in the world, the Epsteins, the Prince Andrews, everything that goes on.
Gaza.
Yeah, well, yeah, and Ukraine and the conflicts, and that group that cannot be mentioned, them being involved again,
And also other parts of the world, Yemen, Sudan. I mean, there's lots
yeah,
of, as you were saying earlier, the Congo. I mean,
yeah,
it's also you look at those kids mining cobalt in the Congo.
yeah, mhm,
And that's, I mean, this is where we're going back to Elon Musk for a minute, because this thing about Musk, if we're talking about things in the context of this spiritual battle, I can't for the life of me work out whether he's good or evil. I'm leaning on the evil side, but he makes very confusing noises, and some of these, I think some of these little demons are actually sent to confuse the shit out of us as well.
mhm, yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Anyway,
but it's yeah, it's a difficult one.
so I don't know if we've achieved much tonight. You
Do
know,
we ever?
well, uh, I think sometimes we
I feel
do.
like we have. I don't. I think it, but we're not. The thing is that we don't necessarily set out to achieve anything. I mean,
Oh yeah, I mean
it's like we never claim to have any answers about the deep state. A lot of it
that's
is just
true.
you and I, talking and asking and just throwing questions up in the air and seeing if any stick
Mhm.
and seeing, and I find your perspective on stuff useful as well because we don't necessarily always agree.
No, we don't.
And
We don't.
we do come at things from a different angle as well.
Yeah, no, I think generally we appear to be on the same page on this one. I think maybe the motives. I think sometimes I tend to favour the more simplistic approach in that these people are doing things generally for the right reasons or to further their own ends. Or they're not acting necessarily cohesively as a massive group. But what happens is, because they are doing what they're doing, it looks like that from the outside. But I think there's certainly a degree of deep state about it. You know, there are people out there who are unaccountable.
Mm.
And I think as soon as you're unaccountable, if you're not accountable to people, you can do what you like, you know, and that's
especially if you're not in the public eye.
Exactly.
I mean, the ones that the real deep state is not something that any of us have ever heard about.
Well, actually, that's a good point, because we should talk briefly about Victoria Nuland then, because you said you think she's deep state, and I would say I don't think she is, because she was too much in the public eye. She maybe didn't want to be in the public eye, but I think she was too much in the public eye to be a deep state operative. I think she just got into a situation where she has embroiled herself in horrible activities that has resulted in hundreds of thousands of people ultimately being killed.
Yeah, but the thing about Newland is that, to me, she actually epitomizes the deep state, because she's one of these people that if it's like she wasn't part of the Trump government, but
No.
she's always, because she's married to Robert Kagan. She should actually be called Victoria Kagan, but
Yeah.
Anyway, that's beside the point. The thing is that she is part of that neocon clique, and one could make the argument that those neocons and the PNAC people and that crowd that kind of coalesced in the US in the late 90s, and then specifically after 9/11 and in the Bush administration, I mean, they're arguably deep state, because they've been carrying on through Republican and Democrat administrations. I mean, they were active under Obama, Bush.
I hear what you're saying. I think Nuland. I mean, Nuland was very active under Obama, right? I think the problem with Nuland is that she's too accountable to be deep state, because she was an appointed person in the government, you know, so she was accountable.
That's a fair point. Yeah,
you know, and if she was true deep state, she would be behind the scenes and wouldn't have allowed herself to be in that position.
Well, she is now. She's working with Hillary Clinton at Columbia University.
I thought she'd retired.
No. When someone leaves the government and they say they're retired, it's actually a code word for they're never coming back into government.
Yeah.
But in her case, no, she's got a very nicely paid.
She's probably got a promotion,
professorship.
Got a promotion. Right. Yeah. I think we've done. I think we've had a good night.
I think
you
so.
Enjoyed
too.
this?
I've very much enjoyed it. Yeah, no, it's an interesting chat. Yeah. Definitely.
So we'll be in touch, and we'll get something recorded for next week. And
sounds good.
You people out there, you know we love you.
Definitely.
We call you out in the chat. Take that as an honour, because not everybody gets called out in the chat. And remember, if you do like it, give us a like, a share. And notice, I ask you at the end of the video if you've liked it. If you're still here, I really appreciate it that you've managed to watch this far. So, with that, anything else, Ed?
Nope, just to say thank you to everyone that was listening and watching. And it's been a lot of fun, John. Thanks.
And it's been great for you.
Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yo, I got a lot of shit to say, so I'ma do this every day. I'll be writing things until I'm fucking buried in my grave. 6 feet deep under, but my body won't decay. Cause my messages are timeless, so they'll put them on display. Oh yeah, I rap with a certainty, I have a sense of urgency. A message for eternity, for everyone internally. I had some people burning me, but now they fucking learn to see I ain't the one to fuck with. Now they looking nervously, and I don't really care what you think of me respectfully. You can kick rocks if you think you're fucking better, see. I will outwork you, turn you to an enemy. Hurt you so bad that you're gonna need some therapy. can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say, yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yeah, I'ma do it my way.
I can't contain it, I'm coming out with a statement. You really changed, man, all your music and arrangement. You don't know shit, shut your mouth, you can save it. I'm the same dude that got his come up from the basement. 100 songs, 100 weeks, didn't change it. Experiments, development, intelligence, and patience. I'll do it all again, cause I never feel complacent. Let's keep the good vibes, positivity's contagious. I'm never looking back, cause I made a life that's passionate. A college graduate suppressing all his talents, yeah. He found a way to go and change, become an advocate. For taking control of your life, go out and battle. And you think you have a dream, then act on it. Get after it, get out your head and fucking capture it. You got one life to master it. Don't give up on your future, we all start losers. We're all late bloomers, gotta struggle through the sewer.
What you say, yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say, yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build